Thank you all so very much for having me. I'm delighted to be here. Dr. Jake Felice. And you can, if you have questions, feel free to reach me at my email address here and or through Dr. Bridget Goodwin, especially if you're interested in some of the literature set. I have PDFs on a lot of what we will be discussing today. And I'd like to talk a little bit about hemp CBD products, bee venom, and kind of draw a few parallels between the two. And I do believe we are, as humans, in turbulent times, and much of our survival of humans is tied to that of bees, largely because of their pollinating abilities for our food crops. Plants have been teachers for me for a long time, and I don't mean that in the anthropomorphic sense. I do mean that in the biochemical sense, which I'll get into in a little bit here. But one thing to understand is that Paracelsus, Greek physician, said several thousand years ago that it is the dose that makes the poison. And I want to tell a couple stories about a couple different types of plant poisons, one of which was first noted in the United States in the 18th century. As colonists had come over from England, it was necessary for them to grow hemp. It was actually legislated, and they were forced to grow hemp by law in agricultural lands. And what was quickly found out was that if you grow hemp cannabis around a pond, for example, all of the fish die. And why is that? It's not that CBD is a poison, but what actually ended up happening was that the rain came, the CBD acids were washed into the pond water, which killed all of the algae. Didn't affect the fish negatively, but it affected their food source, because the plant, the cannabis plant, uses CBD to prevent undergrowth of competing foliage, whether that be for water or sun, direct sunlight. So from an evolutionary perspective, plants use their resources in various ways, including attracting pollinating insects, and they have to make a calculated evolutionary decision about whether they should invest in defense against herbivores or other competitive plants, or they should try to attract friendly creatures. So this is one of the main reasons that plants manufacture these compounds that are evolutionarily designed to directly affect the physiology of other organisms. As I mentioned, the dose makes the poison. CBD does competitively inhibit the growth of other plants. Another favorite plant drug of mine, caffeine, probably my second favorite drug, is produced by the coffee tree. And when the beans, which we classically use as our drink, fall to the soil in and around the tree, they will also competitively inhibit the growth of other plant compounds. Now, the coffee tree uses a very interesting approach in the flowers. They will put a small amount of caffeine in the flowers, which, believe it or not, pollinating insects really love, and it attracts them, and the bees and other pollinating insects get a buzz, so to speak. So caffeine is another example of an evolutionarily derived plant compound that affects human physiology. As a side note, caffeine combined with CBD enhances the pain-relieving qualities of CBD. So much of the time, for many of my pain patients, I will recommend concomitant use of more green tea in the daytime because they can kind of work well together. Another compound that is a poison that we are very familiar with, and also a medicine, is Coumadin. Coumadin is a blood thinner and a lifesaver. It protects against stroke, blood clots in the arms and legs. And Coumadin is a fungus, but they noticed that when cows were eating moldy clover, that they would die. And so in many ways, these plant and natural compounds have taught us about these receptor systems. The cyclooxygenase pathway, which is a very important anti-inflammatory biochemical pathway in the physiology, was discovered through the study of willow bark, for example. So in many ways, some of our very important drug discoveries have come from plants, which is one of the reasons why I refer to them as teachers. Insects are also teachers, and they're also wonderful drug prospecting candidates because they are herbivores, and so their physiology is constantly interacting with, especially for plant-eating insects, with the compounds that plants make. And so in many ways, there is a give and a take. Bees first taught me the power of plants as medicine. When I was a small boy, I went to summer camp. I was stung by a bee, and it didn't hurt that much, but one of the camp counselors, she grabbed a plant and crushed it up, put it right on the bee sting, and I was shocked, and still am to this day, how quickly the pain relieved. That the name of that plant, the common name is plantain. It is not the plantain that we eat, but Plantago officinalis, a common plant in the Pacific Northwest. It grows in other areas as well. I'm not sure if it is a native plant to Australia. But I learned from a very early age the benefits of plants, and that is a story that has stuck with me and has definitely influenced the arc of my career in many ways. I would like to share a study with you, and again, feel free to email me. I loved reading this paper. Cannabis extract has positive immunostimulating effect through proteolytic systems and metabolic compounds of honeybee workers. And what the authors of this paper said in their abstract, and I encourage y'all to read the paper, is that hemp supplementation for bees positively influences the immune system of workers, and the appropriate method of administration may be adapted to the health problem of bees. So not only can hemp and CBD help humans, but there is some indication that it is also very helpful for honeybees. The active constituents of the medicine in cannabis occur largely in the flowers, in the trichomes of the flowers. So I'm hypothesizing here because I'm not an expert, but I would imagine it could be very likely that pollinating bees could derive some benefits from hemp crops, and humans as well, for that matter. Hemp, in addition, is a wonderful source of pollen for bees. So as the bees are struggling, I think the cultivation of large-scale hemp farms, such as in now extensive throughout Canada and certain parts of the US, could be very beneficial for bee populations. Both cannabis use for medicine and bee venom go back thousands of years. The Chinese and Egyptians wrote extensively about the health benefits of both bee venom and cannabis, as did the Europeans. And it is not just the venom, but the propolis and even the honey that can be thought of as having beneficial properties. The medicinal use of bee venom dates back to ancient Egypt and Greece, and has been practiced in China for 3,000 to 5,000 years. For cannabis, we know that it's also at least in the 4,000 to 5,000 year range. And the ancient Greek Dr. Hippocrates, the father of modern medicine, also used bee venom for therapeutic purposes. That includes for rheumatism, some wonderful anti-inflammatory properties, both from bee venom as well as from CBD. We'll talk a tiny bit about the biochemical pathways in a bit. There is preliminary research on cancer therapies for bee venom. I have some papers on that. I'm not as much familiar as I am on the CBD side. One of the wonderful things that CBD does in the cancer space, especially, we have a lot of now cell tissue studies, is CBD enables the immune system to better detect cancer in the body. A lot of the times cancer is cloaked and invisible to the immune system. CBD helps the immune system recognize cancer cells and helps the body's immune system fight the cancer. It's one of its many benefits, and some very good literature on that now in the peer-reviewed literature. Antiviral properties of CBD and bee venom are phenomenal. In the COVID space, which is high on everybody's list, and I am not, to be super clear, I'm not talking about bee venom or CBD as a substitute for vaccination, absolutely not, but as a complementary therapy to help immune function. I think there are some benefits. This is a recent paper. This is a recent paper here on bee venom therapy as a potential complementary medicine candidate for SARS-CoV infections. We also have a lot of research now coming out with cannabidiol, CBD, and bee venom. Here's one paper here and another. Please email me if you would like PDFs of these. What's very interesting about CBD is CBD lands on many receptors in the human body. It lands on the adenosine receptor, which is the same receptor that caffeine lands on. It also lands on the angiotensin receptor, which is where the COVID-19, the SARS virus, makes its entry into our body's cells. So when CBD is in the mix, so to speak, it can land and block that receptor from viral entry, and it also affects the conformation or the shape of the receptor system to prevent viral entry. And there's some really interesting data now and papers out on this, which I would love to share with you and even discuss if anyone wants to, if you're a professional, pick up the phone and give a call. Antibacterial properties, both from bee venom and from CBD. What's super cool and interesting on the CBD side, again, which is my area, CBD is highly effective against certain types of very resistant staph infections, MRSA, and it is so at low concentrations. And what we have recently found out is that it acts through a previously unknown mechanism to protect against bacteria. Why this is important is it's been over 30 years now since we've had a new class of antibiotics developed, especially for some of these really resistant staph infections. And CBD, even at low concentrations, can be effective against these bacteria. So I find that super exciting. Again, the dose and the dose affects the poison. So what can be a poison for plants at certain doses in humans can be hugely beneficial. And even the same chemical compound can have biphasic properties. So a certain concentration of a cannabinoid at a low dose can have a direct opposite effect than at a high dose. This is called a biphasic effect. So the dosing is actually a very important part of effectiveness with some of these medicines / poisons. CBD and bee venom share many overlapping pathways. The phospholipase A2 cascade, which leads into the cyclooxygenase pathway for anti-inflammatory protection. Nuclear factor kappa B, which is a nuclear receptor, so that information is traveling from outside of the cell directly into the nucleus of the cell. TNF alpha, very important in inflammation, interferon gamma, and interleukin 6, all shared properties that both bee venom and CBD influence. So I wish that I had more time to share, but unfortunately the time is quite limited. I'd be super happy to take any questions. And even after this wonderful event is over, I would be more than willing, and it would be lovely to discuss in a collaborative manner. I really am a big fan of bees. One of my favorite stories is in Mark Twain and the Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, where they were in a single one-room schoolhouse, and it was summertime, and all Huck could think about was getting out of school for the summer. And he talked about sitting in class and the windows were open and he could hear the buzzing of the bees outside of the window. And it just conjured for me a relaxing, warm sense. And I have not seen lots of bees congregating in any one particular area like they used to be. So that hurts my heart. But I am encouraged by the fact that not only can bee venom help humans, CBD can help humans, but CBD can also help the bees. And the bees, through their pollinating process, can positively influence the cannabis. Thank you all so much for listening. I'm Dr. Jake Felice, based out of the U.S. and Washington and California. I'd love to answer any of your questions and appreciate you listening.